How you doing?
Good morning. It's morning here. It's not morning everywhere. In New Zealand, it's already afternoon. I'm Elliot, MD Brisbane for Overdose. Welcome to OD and Chill Live number 72. It's been well over a year that we've been doing this now. It's crazy. Welcome my guest today, Joe from Fast. We're going to be talking many things, e-commerce, Fast. We're both Brisbane born, what Brisbane's like in the e-com and retail scene. Before I do jump into things, I do want to just make a note for all our Ukraine family. A large portion of Overdose is actually in Ukraine. They're not just colleagues, they are family to us. We want a big shout out to our Ukraine family and friends. Hope you're all safe, be well. We're all supporting you. Joe, I'd love to throw over to you to do a quick intro. Before we do, I just want to remind everybody that this is live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I probably missed other places where it's streaming. Please feel free to leave comments. Leave a note. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to leave a comment. We'll bring it up and ask Joe. Or if you have a question for me, I'm happy to answer as well. Joe, I'd love to hear, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear, who you are. What do you do? Where are you from?
Thanks, Elliot. I really appreciate you organising this, mate, and I'm very happy to be here. So my name's Joe Fox. I head up ANZ partnerships for Fast. Fast is a identity company that's removing friction at checkout. That's probably the simplest way I can explain it. And I know we're going to get right into it, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, I'd love to ask a few specific questions about Fast. And one of the things about this chat is it's very organic. Part of it is understanding some of the tools that are used in the e-commerce industry, but also the people that move within it as well. So I'd love to start with you. Bring us up to speed with the professional life of Joe and where you sort of started in retail and e-commerce and tech or in digital. Give us a bit of your background. I know you're also a bit of an agency boy as well. So
originally, so I sort of like moved into this space. My partner at the time had a really quick growing e-com business, and I kind of like jumped in. I've always had this little bit of an entrepreneurial business streak. I think I was like, not trying to sound cliche, but that kid who was like selling Pokemon cards and doing all that sort of stuff during school. And I kind of like jumped headfirst into that digital space. So that was before SEO was a big thing, before, when Google Ads kind of like just first came on the scene. And I really just found a big passion for it. And I've got like kind of like a family history in the advertising and marketing space. So my mum's cousin, who I kind of consider a mentor, was responsible for bringing the animals into Optus advertising. So I've kind of always been passionate about that space. And so soon after working on that project with, ex partner, I met my business partner at one of the Google conventions that they used to have in Brisbane, like the agency support events. And essentially, we just decided to go into business. And he has like a really interesting, unique way of looking at things. He's like a designer and a developer, quite an established business person as well. So we kind of launched our agency together, scaled it up quite a bit. At our peak, we had 25 staff. We were, finalists for like Telstra Business Awards, Optus Business Awards, all that sort of jazz. And then I actually sold out of that business because I felt like I really wanted to get into more of an international business and tech kind of a space. And I was working for an organization based out of Scandinavia, and I headed up their APAC operations. So I was the APAC manager for that. And once again, they really specialized in performance marketing, but they had some really cool, unique, proprietary kind of machine learning AI tech that they built with the University of Norway, which was really cool. So I kind of like went on that venture for a while, felt like I did a really good job of that, like expanded offices. We opened offices in Brisbane, was about to open an office in Melbourne, and then obviously the pandemic and everything like that happened. But in the meantime, I'd been keeping up with a good friend of mine that I've sort of been friends with since I started the agency that I had, and that was Dom Holland. And Dom had obviously, approached me sort of during my agency days about the idea that he had with Fast, and it was called something different. And I'd probably get caned if I said that live, but and essentially we just kept in close contact. I saw the response that he was getting in the US. I saw that he'd attracted some amazing talent, and obviously, had connected with our co-founder Alison Barr, who's got a very rich history in tech and in Silicon Valley, and is ex-Uber and has done some amazing things. So it was really cool to see what was happening there. And Dom kind of reached out and was like, I want you to be the first person on the ground for Fast in ANZ, which I thought was a massive compliment. And obviously, being in an exciting piece of tech, I jumped at the opportunity, and I think I was like staff number or fastronaut, as we call ourselves, number 50 something. And so I was there early days, but there was some incredible talent there. And now we're over 450 staff, I think it is. And that was 13-14 months ago. So we're having this massive rapid growth, and it won't be my first pun of this overdose and chill, I'm sure, but we're growing incredibly fast, and the level of talent that we've attracted to the organization is amazing. And obviously the partner ecosystem that we've managed to build, not just in ANZ, but globally, is super impressive. We're working with the best performance SIs, agencies in the world, such as yourselves, obviously. So it's a really exciting time at Fast.
It has been incredible, to watch Fast, grow in leaps and bounds over the last few years. Dom's obviously moved quite a lot of the operation over to San Fran, I believe.
Yes.
A few rounds of funding in, but going back to that starting sort of phase of Fast, even when it was branded differently, which I won't ask about. What is the premise? What was the idea initially? How has it changed? How has it morphed? What is it now? Is it still the same technology? Is it still that same core idea that it started with? And I guess, for people who don't know Fast, talk us through.
Yeah, definitely. So the original idea of Fast actually came from Dom's grandmother, or Dom's wife's grandmother. And essentially she was trying to check out and purchase groceries during a family kind of emergency crisis situation on a major grocery retailer in Australia. And essentially there was just this continued loop of not being able to recognize her identity, not being able to log in, not being able to check out. And I think that kind of obviously created a spark in Dom's mind. And anyone who knows Dom he's an incredibly energetic and passionate guy, and he loves to solve problems, right? And so he's kind of looked at that and thought, this is an interesting opportunity. Now, there is kind of a similar premise that exists on Amazon, right? And most people who are watching probably have shopped on Amazon, and obviously being able to one-click checkout through Amazon, because Amazon has identified you as an individual, it's an amazing experience if you can nail that. So the premise has always been to remove friction, and our core product offering, as I mentioned kind of at the start, is we are an identity company, and the issue that we're solving at the moment is payments, and we're removing friction from that payment space. So everything from being able to check out at the PDP, which is a lot easier than having to add to cart and continuously go through this long form field process to constantly recognize yourself on new sites. It's all about saving the customer time, and the merchant advantage is that you get more conversions, because no matter how well a website performs, no matter how much traffic you're sending to a site, no matter how much engagement you get, the like conversion rates are much lower than what they should be, right? And so clearly there's a problem there. And clearly from the growth and uptake we've had, we're helping to solve that problem for merchants.
I picked up on one little phrase you said where you mentioned the problem that you're trying to solve at the moment. Does that mean that there are other sort of problems with identity, maybe outside of payments and other areas of, you know, online interactions that you're actually looking at solving potentially down the track as well? Or is that something that is not public yet?
Yeah, I mean, we are live. So it's kind of, I think it just makes sense for us, you know, the way that everything's going and the way that we're growing. So I won't talk too much to the roadmap because I know that the comms and PR team are probably watching, and I'll get a caning for that too. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like, that's at the end of the day, we're a payments and identity company. And I think this whole removing friction piece solves a lot of problems, particularly in e-commerce right now. But online identity is an issue that I think could have a lot of benefits from something such as Fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure once you have certain pieces of that friction removed around identity and somebody owning that, and I think one of the key parts of that is that you're not necessarily linked to a retailer. You're not using Amazon Pay to pay for everything, in which case Amazon still knows what you're buying, even if you're not buying on Amazon. You know, have certain concerns about certain platforms like Google or maybe Apple, and around identity there, as much as they're trying to play in the payment space. So if you've got that identity platform and you can solve other potential problems down the track, why wouldn't you sort of look at that option as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think to add to that, Elliot, I mean, a perfect example is what we were able to do at Christmas just gone in the US with Saks Off Fifth. And our partnership with Condé Nast, and in this particular case, GQ magazine, right? And so we were able to decouple in a completely headless format that environment, having to shop specifically on the e-com site by being able to have this gift guide. And I'm sure we've all seen them on Vogue and GQ, where it's like, you know, 25 best gifts for Christmas or 25 best leather jackets you should own for winter. Having those environments actually be shoppable via Fast is incredibly powerful. So I encourage you, I think I have sent it to you, but it's a really cool way of just being like, okay, so obviously websites are incredibly important, but if we have a look at e-commerce as a whole landscape, the ability to be able to integrate headless checkout is incredibly powerful. And we've done some really, really cool things around like sports activations, and being able to use QR for completely decoupled headless checkout as well. So it's a really exciting space to be in, and it kind of translates to this like omni-channel experience in a way as well.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's interesting, and anybody who works in e-commerce knows this, the multiple transitions that have happened over the last few years with the rise of marketplaces. And obviously marketplaces are here to stay and they'll continue to grow, but there was a much more of a craze a few years ago when Amazon opened in Australia. And then, you know, everybody wanted to be on marketplaces, but then realized that you can't also let go of your direct-to-consumer branding as well. Maybe not selling direct-to-consumer, but you still own a brand and you can't offload that to a marketplace in all cases. You need to maintain some control over that, and everybody's business models is different. And being able to maintain that sort of brand, but able to also have your products available in different channels. And like you mentioned, we're talking about publishing channels there. They're not marketplaces, they're publishers. And what you'd expect to see is ads where you throw up display advertising and you click through and end up on a website or somewhere else where you purchase something. But you're talking about actually checking out seamlessly within that sort of publishing environment, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. And I think that's exciting, right? And it comes back to the whole premise of Fast about removing friction for the shopper. So instead of having to take them down this conversion funnel, which might be, you know, landing on that publisher page, redirecting the affiliate links, all of that sort of stuff. You know, our head of publisher partnerships, Matt Ackley, is so passionate about delivering this. And I think it just makes sense. I mean, it's kind of one thing that I think everyone has adapted to during the pandemic and during these times is, one, obviously it's increased e-com as a whole, but I think it's made people really value their time a lot more. And I think that as people are, kind of living busy lives, there's more of this remote or hybrid or completely work from home space. People are really putting a value on their time, which they may not necessarily have done before. So I think being able to remove all that friction, save customers time, is incredibly beneficial. And then obviously for the merchant or for the brand, they see this massive uptake in conversion because it's more quick and convenient. So it's really cool. And I think, on that note, and you mentioned this about, people keeping a strong brand presence. I think that's something that agencies such as yourselves are doing an incredible job for brands for. I mean, there's definitely specific brands that I've seen that you're working with that have just gone from strength to strength because they are tightening that presence and really focusing on that brand side of things. So I think it's really cool to see the evolution that we're going through in e-com at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as an agency and a full service agency, it's obviously, we like to provide services for retailers around a range of different functions. But when I'm speaking, especially to direct to consumer brands, the thing that they should hold tightly to themselves and work as internal as impossible is on that branding and content piece. Like, no, you can't outsource that. You can't. And I'm speaking generally here, every business is different, but you can't, extricate that from your business. It needs to be what you do. Every touch point with your brand has to be as close to your business as possible. And every touch point with your customer needs to be as internal as possible. So it's really hard to get to that point where, you use external agencies for certain aspects, but what do you need as a business to be as internal as possible? And it is brand, it's your communications, it's how you talk to your customers, it's how you talk to your customers through marketing, but also through customer service as well. So that needs to be internal, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I think that brand now, I think large organizations and brands are realizing that more and more now. And I think that's a really valid point because it does have a livable component in every role of the business, from everything from when people get that first impression, as you mentioned, marketing and advertising, right through customer service. Yes, but even internal brand and culture, I think, is kind of falling into that. So it's really interesting to see. I mean, we live in such a crazy, interesting time, but it's great to see all of these changes that are happening in business and particularly in marketing, advertising, tech, and digital.
Absolutely. Changing pace a little bit, and this is still relevant to Fast because, as a local business that's become, a massive, they've raised a lot of money to accelerate what you're trying to achieve. But it takes me back to, some of the startups and the industry in Brisbane as well. If we look over the last 20 years and the last maybe 15 years of a burgeoning startup scene in Brisbane and what it's become, there are so many great brands, both retail brands and tech brands that are in Brisbane. And I know you've spent the time outside of Brisbane as well, but how have you seen Brisbane change? And I guess through the lens of more sort of retail and technology and e-com, how have you seen Brisbane change over the last 15 or so years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. There seems to be so many success stories that come out of Brisbane. And maybe I do have that Brisbane lens on. I'm incredibly proud of being a Brisbaneite. And no matter where I sort of go or where I base myself in the future, I'll definitely always call here home. But it's fascinating to me to see there seems to be, obviously, I think in Australia, there can sometimes be a bit of a tall poppy syndrome that exists. I think it's more prevalent. And I guess working with a predominantly US staffed organization now, I see how much support is given to entrepreneurs in the US kind of versus a lot of the entrepreneur community that I'm friends with, particularly in Australia. But there's been so many success stories here, whether it's, leisure and sports apparel, whether it's, nutrition, whether it's tech startup, whether it's, I guess all fronts, whether it's agency, whether it's anything that kind of falls into that business and entrepreneur space. And I think the reason for that is that I do think people are starting to realize what original Brisbaneites have known for some time, is that this is an incredibly livable city. It's not overcrowded. We have like amazing things to do. The hospitality space is growing like crazy here. There's a real draw of lifestyle here. I personally think we have the best beaches in the world. People might want to debate about that. You can hit the questions for that. But I think it's one of those things where if you're happy and you're content and you're doing good things on weekends, I mean, you and I spoke earlier about this, about boating and those sorts of things. Like, there's not many other places in the world where you can just jump on a boat, travel 15, 30 minutes max across a channel and be at an amazing national park and see turtles and dolphins and spend your day in crystal clear water, which looks like it's plucked straight from, Instagram influencers posts. Like, we have a really, really good quality of lifestyle here. And I think the more happy people are, and this is general, I think the better your thoughts are, which means the better your ideas are. And I also think if people are happy, they're more likely to support other people. And if people are living out their dreams, those people are surrounding by other people who are living out their dreams, which just creates this energy that we probably can't explain, that helps things grow in a way. And I also think the being small is that if you are in those circles of tech and marketing and advertising and all of those sorts of things, you're all connected in a way. And there's this recognition of people who are in that space, like, hey, I'm going to help out where I can. And I think, partnerships, I see that more than anything, is that's what it's all about, right? It's about, helping each other to grow in a positive way that benefits everyone involved. And I think we have a big community of that here in Brisbane. Obviously, with the Olympics coming up, that's another thing. And obviously with the pandemic too, there's so many people that are relocating here because back to that whole lifestyle thing, it's like, if I'm going to do the hybrid, work from home piece, I'm going to do it in one of the best places in the world. And I think that's why we've got that here. That's just my opinion. And so I could ramble about Brisbane all day long.
Well, you raised a point that I was going to ask about as well. How has FAST transitioned over the last couple of years? Has there been a transition where you're already, working hybrid or relatively remotely? Has it been a disruption to the business at all?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were pretty much born out of the pandemic, or FAST, what you see is now is pretty much born out of the pandemic. So we've had this really cool, it's like a complete remote first policy, which is great for culture, right? Because everyone's energetic, everyone gets to have, this sort of fast flex kind of a situation. If you want to go and jump into a WeWork because you want to get out of the house, you can. For me, for example, I love it because I'm an early riser, right? And I love to get crossover with the US. And being the first Australian employee, I was kind of in a situation where I'm I need to be connecting with people as much as possible while doing this hybrid model. So it allowed me to get one-on-one time with, some of the original people at the organization, and as new people come through. And it's really cool because everyone's happy to share knowledge. So for me, it works great because I'm up early. I get good US crossover when we're, working cross-functionally on projects. I can then handle all of my meetings, in the mornings and early afternoon. And then I kind of get the afternoons to myself, which is really good because, I'm very active. As I busted my knee at jiu-jitsu, but I typically get to use that afternoon time for what I need to use it for me, and going back to that point of keeping happy and keeping, energized and keeping motivated. So it's been really cool. And I think I wouldn't have it any other way. And I love that I can still get face-to-face time when I catch up with partners such as yourselves, or, our team's growing in Australia. So we're spending more and more time together. And we've just hired a new, really cool head of sales here in ANZ. Rad, who's got an awesome background in tech in ANZ and globally. So being able to still get that face-to-face time, but still have my work-life balance, perfect. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Has that helped the talent pipeline in those hiring processes as you're growing?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not shocked. I'm like, it doesn't surprise me because of how quick we're growing and the buzz we've got and all of those sorts of things. But I'm absolutely amazed and to be honest, grateful every day to see the talent that is joining us in every department, and to be able to work closely with those people is incredible. And I really thank, I guess I thank the way that the world is for that to be able to happen, because, you can connect with someone who's got such like mastery of a particular skill within the organization just by setting up a Zoom meeting. It's fascinating to me.
It is. It's fascinating. And I know we're sort of flogging a dead horse talking about remote work and COVID and whatnot, but it was inevitable anyway that we were going to head in this direction at some point. There was going to be a mass decentralization. Even, for those of us in Australia understand the property market and trying to get into the property market, it's hard for a lot of people. It was always inevitable that there was going to be a decentralization, and we sort of accelerated those plans. And as we saw, lots of memes flying around about what accelerated your digital plans, it was COVID. But, it's great because people get to see what innovation actually does for a business. It's not something you can sleep on anymore. The proof is in the pudding that you can actually innovate positively and make a positive impact for the business without having to go, look, we need to test this constantly and being overly cautious all the time. That investments in that space do actually pay off.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, obviously, I think the agency model that Todd and you and the crew have adapted reminds me so much of a tech startup, in the fact that, being able to pick the best talent and work with the best talent globally and roll that up into one overarching agency and agency model, to me is just an example of that, right? And it's been so impressive to see the growth and the acquisitions and what you guys are doing on that front. And I don't think, obviously, I think it comes down to having the courage and the appetite for adventure to do that. But I think it's just been really cool to see, and I don't know that would be possible without this remote hybrid sort of working situation we're in. And it's really cool to see. And I mean, as you said, like, the innovation is coming through in the work you guys are producing and putting out. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is. How are you seeing, speaking of innovation, actually, before I jump in, we've had a question pop up from Lex, one of our Brisbane team members, actually. Are there any particular industries or verticals that you think would benefit more from FAST than others? Or have you seen more success in certain verticals or industries? Great question.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Lex. The interesting thing and what I've seen with FAST is, because I think originally when I first came on board and all of those sorts of things, I looked at this in a very conventional way, in the fact that I think a lot of people would, right? But this, I guess, kind of ties back to Dom's original spark of thought for FAST. But it was interesting to see, because I thought, millennials, like people who are, TikTokers, who are like, very short attention span in terms of content and moving through things and, spontaneous shopping and all of those sorts of things. But it's amazing. Like, we work with a couple of agricultural companies, right? And you think, oh, agricultural companies, that's interesting. But we do. And they sell spare parts for like tractors and, machinery and items for agriculture and farming. And the conversion increases for them have been insane. So that's kind of been the most interesting thing for me, is you would think that it would be, particular brands or particular retail verticals, but it's so I guess it's so applicable, because no one wants a long shopping experience. And I think the general demographic for them is an older, not necessarily, tech first, or they haven't necessarily grown up with social media and those sorts of things, but they like the ease of the product and they like removing that friction from their shopping experience.
Absolutely.
So,
an interesting unintended consequences, perhaps, if that may not be the right way to put it, but removing friction. Obviously, as you mentioned, that low attention span as you're flicking through TikTok or Insta or something like that, of actually checking out really quickly, that's a no-brainer. But as you sort of remove those frictions and you start thinking about other, demographics who might be hard of sight or might not be able to browse as easily as other people can, and perhaps it is in those industries or many, many others, removing that friction opens up a whole other sort of demographic that you may not have intended to hit first, but is probably much larger than the demo that you were probably targeting in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing so much more of that, and I think we'll just continue to see that. I think it's like the coming back to that attention span and saving time and accessibility is definitely a part of what we're focusing on.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you see, back to the sort of other industries and verticals, and you've taken on some, like your Condé Nast and Saks Fifth, those kind of fashion-heavy sort of brands? Are you finding big pickup in those sorts of industries as well?
Definitely, yeah. That's. I mean, I think one really cool thing is those brands typically tend to be innovators and first movers on a lot of things anyway, right? Like if you have a look at BNPL, majority of the brands that those companies partnered with early days were all in that fashion retail space. And I think seeing things that do remove friction or create more opportunities for customers to partake in that brand experience with those brands, they jump at. So yeah, in short, definitely, and that's kind of consistent globally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I was working for a fashion retailer when Afterpay was in its infancy, and we were one of the first few to sort of pick it up and start running with it and look to implement it in store as their sort of trial in-store experience. And it was bizarre at the time because it was such a new technology. Nobody was doing BNPL before that. But it was literally a 30% uplift online that we saw from that. Doesn't work for everybody. You need to caveat that with, all sorts of different things, and you need to strategize around whether it's the right tool for you, because BNPL is very different from a fast sort of checkout, which seems more universal. But giving people those options, and you could have the ethical and financial argument around these things as well. But from a retailer's perspective, giving people those options just opened up so many more opportunities for them.
Yeah. And I think we're going to continue to see more evolutions in that area. And I think the premise is still all about, removing friction, less conversion, funnels, all of that, flattening the conversion funnel, all of those sorts of things play into that convenience factor and making it, a more pleasant experience.
Yeah, fantastic. Just a quick reminder for everybody as well, and we've had a question come through straight away. I was about to remind people that they are welcome to pop questions through, and Raven has done exactly that. With remote working, how do you encourage and drive productivity, and what do you do to keep up staff morale, culture, and inclusivity? Great question.
Yeah, so we have an amazing, team of people who are focusing on, everything to do with culture, everything to do with inclusivity, events, all of those sorts of things. And I think it's been really cool to see that those roles have been something we've prioritized. Like it hasn't just been a focus on get as many engineers as we possibly can or get as many salespeople as we possibly can. There's always been a very strong focus on having the right people to manage those things that are so critical to, I guess, earlier in the conversation, talking about keeping everyone happy and energized and morale high. So we have an amazing, I guess, kind of like it's office manager who is very focused on making sure that, we have cultural events. We have, happy hours that are revolving around global schedules. We have a weekly all hands where everyone jumps on. We've got our, channels on Slack that are all about giving people kudos and celebrating, the values of FAST. We have so many initiatives. Like it's been really, really nice to see that has been something that leadership has focused on from the beginning, and it's now been instilled as part of the company culture. And when people are onboarded, we have Fastronaut boot camps and all of those sorts of things. And those boot camps aren't just focused around what you'll be doing in your particular department or role, but they'll also be focused around what our values are, what our morals are, inclusivity, culture, all of the events and self-learning and things that we, as an organization provide to all of the Fastronauts to make sure that they're happy and energized and motivated. So that for me is probably one of there's a million reasons why I love working at Fast, but that's been really cool to see that it's not just catered to, a particular group. It's really focused and tailored to the whole entire organization. And so shout out to everyone who focuses on those sorts of things for Fast, because and I think being on an island on my own for I think it was like 6-7 months of my Fast journey. I was the one, I think, if anything, who was going to realize that the quickest, whether that was there or not, in terms of, connectivity to the rest of the org. So I've never not felt, included within the organization from based upon the initiatives that are implemented.
It's interesting because you do see a lot of businesses who are working remotely and they've never really considered doing that sort of thing before. Having these sorts of things tends to be an afterthought, and that's a shame because, as a leader, as someone who's managing a team, or even just someone in a team, you learn so much from people from those personal interactions. And it's not just, the 1 hour meeting that you have with them a week that you're actually interacting with them. You're talking to them every day and you learn so much about each other from that situation. But going remote, you might only have those meetings that you have in your calendar where you actually get to interact with each other, and you don't get to learn from each other. You don't get to understand how does that person react to certain inputs or to certain stimulus. And having those sorts of things as an afterthought means that you're reacting to something. You're reacting to people having low morale or not feeling as part of the team. So you need to be proactive. You need to make sure that connectivity isn't just technology. It's about what you're doing to include everybody in your office, no matter where they are, in, personal chat, not just work chat, not just meetings, but having communication outside of that to make sure that they do still feel connected and part of a community, a work community.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to give 2 more quick examples on that because they touch very close to the point you mentioned. I had to have, I've been in the wars this year. Like I had I had a really bad wisdom tooth surgery and all of that sort of thing. And I took a bit of time off. And my manager, Calanthea, amazing person at staff at Fast. And, I got this knock on the door when I was having some time off, and there's 3 pints of Ben and Jerry's at the door for me because, I was having a bad time. And that's just an example of one example of that level of care that's genuine. That's not a required thing to do, but that's just a manager who genuinely cares. And then, another example is we have this fast friend kind of a thing. So as someone on board, you get paired up with a buddy, during your onboarding period and, on an ongoing basis. So if you're unsure about, where certain things in terms of documentation may live, or what certain policies or the way things are done, or just any question, you can feel really comfortable because you've been connected and sort of paired with this person who's able to give you that information. And I think, there's so many cool little things like that, and I could probably go on with a million stories, but I won't ramble. But it's cool to see that, and it's cool to see organizations adapting that in their policies.
It's just like your first day of school. It's so much nicer in your first day of school. You've got somebody there to show you around, because you get so lost otherwise. And I'm at that point because I probably went to like 9 different primary schools as a kid. So I'm in school a lot. And, you know, it's the same in the workplace. You obviously a bit more mature and you can ask questions, but you're never sure if you might be looking like an idiot or asking something stupid. So having somebody that you can confide in, go, don't get this, what am I meant to be doing here?
Yeah. I mean, we're all just big kids at the end of the day, right? So that those things are still super important.
Absolutely. So what do you see, going back to sort of ecom and potentially fast? The question from me now, which is more like an audience question, but it's going from me. What are you seeing as sort of the next phases of iterations? You know, we've got sort of platform things that are happening, like people are talking about headless a lot more. You know, it's a lot more common in other parts of the world. Australians are talking about it a lot more. But outside of those sort of more platform things, what are you seeing happening broadly in e-commerce? Where are things transitioning to? This might be a plug for fast. It might not be. It might just be a personal opinion. But where do you see that sort of interaction and conversion and purchase point sort of shifting over the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, I know I've said removing friction probably 1,000 times already so far, but I still do think that that's really important. I think, you know, omni-channel is still really important. I think creating this experience, and it comes back to some of the things that we've touched on from, you know, a brand journey perspective, is being able to create this like kind of seamless omni-channel experience is so important. And I know we've touched on, you know, coronavirus and COVID and all of that sort of thing quite a few times as well. But I think, you know, QR code had the best comeback of all time, right?
It did.
Like, it really did. It was like, hey, I'm back and I'm here and I'm probably here to stay. So I
QR
think
a running joke, not even like just over years ago.
It really was. And it was kind of like when you'd see it, you'd be like, oh, that's like kind of outdated. And you'd see it on a business card and you're like, oh, I don't want to look at that. But now it's kind of everywhere. And I think those sort of, I guess, kind of tools and that whole headless ability and the whole concept of removing friction, I definitely see where is the future. I don't like getting involved into the full metaverse conversations because that stuff, to be quite frank, and as someone who's very like tech adaptive, I find that, you know, at the moment, I just haven't gotten my head around that whole space and what that's going to look like. But obviously, I mean, maybe that's going to be part of an omni-channel experience. Like, do you have this omni-channel experience where it's like, you know, online, offline, in-store and activation, and then also too, if you plug on a headset, you're now in a virtual environment? Is that then what, you know, omni-channel truly becomes? I don't know, but I think the one thing that I think will always be consistent, and one thing that I think has continually happened throughout commerce and retail and e-commerce in general, is that it's all about saving people time and making the purchase journey and the brand journey more exciting and relevant and personalized, and making the path to purchase as easy as possible. So that's kind of, I think, not too much fundamentally will change. I just think the logistics and the technologies that get us there will continue to improve, and there'll be new players and there'll be all sorts of things. But I think there's a really good opportunity for companies in this space at the moment. So in short, the too long didn't read is, I think it's going to be all still focused on improving brand journey and improving customer journey and removing friction from the purchase path.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's bringing the brand and the brand's customer experience as close to the consumer and as friction-free to the consumer as possible, rather than always pulling consumers to whatever channels you're in, making sure that wherever the channels they are, they have that touch point with your brand if they wish to, and can actually interact with it, whatever that channel may be, whatever, if it's a physical world or metaverse world as well. And now that we can go into the metaverse and order McDonald's from a virtual McDonald's and get it to our front door, I'm sure they're innovators that everybody looks up to, McDonald's, and we'll see a lot more crazy shit like that happening in the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think there's nothing you can do but continue to do what you're doing, continue to push for innovation, and grab some popcorn and sometimes sit on the sidelines and just watch it all roll out.
Watch the craziness unfold. Joe, It's been absolutely fantastic chatting with you this morning, and thanks for the people who popped in questions as well. They were really good questions. It's been great chatting. Do you have any questions or any things you want to sort of shout out before we wrap up today?
No, I obviously just want to shout out Overdose, shout out everyone at Fast. I'm really excited about this relationship that we have with you guys. I think it's really cool to see two innovative organizations working alongside each other, and I can't wait to keep things moving forward. And thank you so much, and looking forward to catching up in person again soon, my friend.
Fantastic. It was great chatting with you again, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. And thank you for everybody for tuning in this morning.
Thanks, Elliot.